Hello, everybody. This is Mr. Kelly. I'm recording this on Monday afternoon. I have had a couple cough drops, and I am ready to talk about the Canterbury Tales. So I hope you're ready too. You should be listening to this, I think, on Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on what class you're in. But if you have any questions about anything here, always feel free to email me. This is The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. It is going to be one of the most important things we do here in quarter two. Your Lord of the Flies essay was obviously a very big deal, and we spent a lot of time on that. I hope to have those graded by the end of this week, since, I'm literally locked in my room. And after your essay, we also, of course, talked about A Modest Proposal. We are going to be reading a play coming up here as well. So, guarantee you that the Canterbury Tales is going to be on the midterm. If anyone would like to bet me $1,000 whether it will be on the midterm, I will gladly take that bet. So please make sure, as we're going through these videos, and I'm probably going to do 3 of these, please make sure you're taking good notes. I think I have a guided notes thing that I'm going to post with this video for you to use. And after we're done with this introduction, we're going to take a look at the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, which is where Chaucer introduces a lot of his characters. And then we're also going to, in the third video, take a look at the Pardoner's Tale, which is one of the stories that is a part of this work. And we'll talk about that as we get closer to it. Also important, we are going to have a quiz on this stuff here that we're talking about. A Modest Proposal will be on the quiz as well. It'll be A Modest Proposal and the Canterbury Tales, and that will be on December 7th. So my thinking is that we'll have these videos, we'll go over all the important stuff that's present in the Canterbury Tales. I will be back on Monday of next week. We will then be able to answer any questions you have in person about this stuff. We'll do a review day, and then on Wednesday of next week, we'll have our quiz on Chaucer and Swift. It won't be a particularly long quiz. It's not big enough to be called a test, but it's close to. It's like a big quiz. I don't know. I don't like the word quest for an assessment, but I guess it's a quest. All right. Anyway, speaking of quests, let's accomplish our goal today and talk about the Canterbury Tales. So what is it? It's just the most famous piece of literature from the medieval period, which, at least in England. The medieval period goes from 1066, which, if you are a history nerd, you might recognize as the start of the Norman conquest there, the Battle of Hastings, but that's okay. If you're not a history nerd, that's okay. And then it is written in 1392 by Geoffrey Chaucer. Geoffrey Chaucer was born in 1343, died in 1400. I believe he died in 1400 just to give you a nice round number for you to remember, so you can appreciate his sacrifice there. He is known as the father of English poetry, kind of a big deal. And he is the first writer to use what's called the language of the people. So one of the things we started about talking about with Old English is that English is like a mix of a lot of different languages here. Um, most people in England before Chaucer, writers wrote in French or Latin. French was sort of the language of the nobility at the time. Latin, of course, classic. Uh, but then there's like weird language that a lot of the people were speaking, which was this sort of mix of Germanic, uh, French, just a bunch of different influences there, which became what we would call modern English. And Chaucer is the first person who actually wrote in the language that the people in England were talking about. Because, again, most of the writers here, if you're talking about 1392 when this is written, most people can't write, most people can't read. The people who can read and write are mostly connected to either the nobility or the church. The nobility was mostly speaking French, the church was mostly using Latin, and so to have a major work written in English, it's kind of a big deal, and it's something that's a lot more accessible to people as well. What does Middle English look like? Looks like this. You may remember that we looked at this same prayer in Old English, and almost nobody had any idea that this was the Our Father. As we can see here, compared to that, the Old English with Beowulf, or that era, this is getting a little bit closer to what we would call modern English. There's still a lot of confusion here, maybe, but we can also start seeing some phrases here that make sense. If we understand that there's not really a V, and that U's and V's are a little bit more interchangeable here. Um, Our Father that art in heavens. That's getting. It's with. I'm not saying that you would want to start texting each other using Middle English for clarity, but it's a heck of a lot closer than what we saw when we talked about Old English with Beowulf. So Beowulf, Anglo-Saxon stuff, that is Old English. This, what Chaucer is writing in, we call Middle English. And Geoffrey Chaucer is buried in Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. And so he is the first commoner buried in a site reserved for royalty. And today, if you look at Poets' Corner, it's the final resting place for a lot of England and Britain's most famous authors. Charles Dickens, Rudyard Kipling are both buried there. Many other famous poets and writers as well. And so, again, it's significant because usually that was just royalty. And it says a lot about your impact as an artist, as a writer, when you're basically treated like royalty, not just when you're alive, but after you die as well. And so what is this major work that helped Chaucer make such an impact? This is his biggest well-known, what we study from him today. Major impact here. It is a story about a pilgrimage, which is a long journey to a sacred site. And this particular pilgrimage here begins at the Tabard, an inn in central London. And it goes all the way to Canterbury Cathedral, which is a church in Kent, England. So I will now pause for a minute and let you Google how long it would take to walk from the Tabard, or at least you could just say London to Kent. the city of London to the city of Kent, both of which are in England. And then you can put that down in your notes here as well. Feel free to pause this, but if not, here is a small dramatic pause to let you find that answer and put it in your notes. Canterbury Cathedral is a very famous site because it is where Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, was murdered on the altar. And so medieval people in England went to Canterbury to seek health and healing. There's a connection there with miracles of healing. And our one sentence summary of the Canterbury Tales: a group of 30 pilgrims, so there's 30 people traveling to Canterbury Cathedral together, entertain each other on the way to Canterbury Cathedral by competing in a storytelling competition, and the winner gets a free dinner. Now, you may think that's a lot of work for a free dinner, and you're kind of right, but this is also a great way for them to pass the time on their journey. They're walking this very long distance. It is not something that they are, driving in a car for a few hours here. It's not like they can just make a road trip playlist to get them through a few hours of driving. They're going to need to entertain themselves for quite a while. They're going to be walking there. They're going to be walking back as well. And this is one of the ways that people entertained each other, frankly, before they had so much other media. I mean, a lot of these people that are going to be going on the pilgrimage can't read, even if they could. Carrying around too many books is kind of difficult, and also not that many people have books at the time. And then beyond that, it's speaking to each other that is going to be their main source of entertainment here. And so these 30 pilgrims all decide, hey, we're going to have a storytelling competition. The one who tells the best story gets a free dinner. And the Canterbury Tales is one of the most famous examples of what we call a frame tale, a story within a story. If you ever have a character in the story telling you the story, either as a flashback or telling stories in a different way, one of the most famous examples is 1001 Arabian Nights, where you have, well, it's kind of a long story, but I'll give you the short version. There is a sultan whose wife cheats on him, and he has her put to death for her disloyalty. And then, to make sure that no one can ever betray him like that again, he marries somebody new every day, spends the night with them, and then has them executed right after, which is obviously, going a little bit overboard. And they start running out of people for this sultan to marry, and eventually he marries a clever young woman named Scheherazade, and what she does is she starts telling a story to the sultan, but sort of ends it on this big dramatic cliffhanger where nobody's sure what's going to happen. And he's like, okay, fine, well, I'll let you live another night and you can finish the story. And then she finishes that story, but then starts a new one, and then that one gets to some big dramatic cliffhanger. And he's like, okay, fine, well, I'll let you live again. And keeps going for, as you can guess here, 1001 Nights. And so there's the frame tale is the story that is in the story. The frame tale is the big story that all the other little stories happen in. In 1001 Arabian Nights, the big story is this tale of Scheherazade trying to keep herself alive by telling all these stories and to the Sultan. And then all the smaller stories that she tells are within that bigger frame tale. Again, it's a frame like a picture frame, right? The picture frame goes around the picture. The frame tale is the story that goes around all the other stories that's present in the work. And so here in the prologue, Chaucer introduces the 30 different pilgrims. He talks about what they look like, a little bit about their personalities. That's kind of the introduction to everybody. And then the pilgrim steps up to tell his or her story. And then after the story's told, people react and you see what's happening. And, well, this character liked it and this one didn't. And then the next person steps up to tell his or her story. And then they react to that one again. And, the pattern continues to repeat through the book, where we have a story, reaction, story, reaction. And so the frame tale in the Canterbury Tales is, hey, here's these 30 pilgrims going to this site of healing, this shrine. And then all the stories that are within it are the smaller works that they're telling to each other. Originally, every pilgrim was supposed to get 2 stories on the way there and 2 on the way back, which would be 4 per person, which means, for you math students out there, 120 stories were planned. And unfortunately for Chaucer, he died before finishing it, so the final version only has 22 complete stories and 2 half-finished ones. So it was supposed to have 120, 4 per person for each of the 30 pilgrims. So instead, we've only got 22 complete ones and 2 half-finished ones. And we talked a little bit about this idea of satire when we looked at A Modest Proposal. What is satire? Satire is using humor and literature as a way of making social commentary, to talk about what is happening in society, to point out the problems with it in a way that is sometimes the only way that you can. Sometimes it's even more effective than maybe a political challenge because it reaches so many more people. And so the Canterbury Tales, again, uses satire, this social commentary through literature and humor, to point out examples of corruption, especially in the medieval church. Chaucer saw a lot of problems that were present in the medieval church. And as he looked at it, he's not quite going to openly push for these reforms, because that could be a little bit dangerous here. But he uses his writing as a way of pointing out this corruption that's present. And so it's important to note here, not every single pilgrim is going to be the victim of satire here. He's not making fun of every single person that's on this pilgrimage, but he does take shots at a lot of them. Sometimes they're like more heavy satire where he's really going after somebody. Sometimes it's more light. And sometimes he's just being very genuine about the person. He's not really commenting about them in a critical way at all. And so as we read these different stories here, as we hear about the different pilgrims in the prologue, think about whether Chaucer's trying to show us when something is not quite right about the person being described. And so that is our introduction to the Canterbury Tales. We are going to Next, we will take a look at the prologue and see some of the different characters that are present here. And then after that, we're going to look at one of the stories that one of those characters winds up sharing with the group. So, thank you all. If you have any questions, of course, send me an email. But that is it for this video.